So the first type of meaning-based depression is what I call Logjam Depression. For people to be at their most psychologically healthy and emotionally healthy, our emotions and all parts of ourselves need to be able to exist within us and be expressed in some way in our lives. Emotions that are allowed to flow, in other words, to be recognized and named, and then just allowed to be felt, they'll run their course. This doesn't mean we need to act on our every emotion. In fact, part of learning to regulate our emotions and developing emotional maturity is not having to act on all our emotions and not having to act on our emotions when the situation doesn't call for it. On the other hand, if we're shamed for having emotions, or if some part of ourselves is cut off or sent away into hiding, this can cause a logjam depression. I'll give you an example. When I was 13, my grandmother, who I was very close to and I grew up living next door to, died just after we moved across the country. So I wasn't able to go visit her when she was dying. My mom went out there, and my cousin, who's older, was out there, and she was able to visit my grandmother. And when I talked to my cousin on the phone about it, I told her that I wished I was there. And she asked me if I was angry at my mom for not allowing me to go there. And I remember being confused and thinking, it never occurred to me that I could be angry at my mom. That emotion wasn't possible. It just didn't feel possible or allowed. And when I was 13, after my grandmother died, that was probably the beginning of one of my first depressions. Though I never acknowledged it at the time, I had no conscious idea that I was sending away this part of me that was angry at my mom, because anger just didn't feel like an option. So this happens with any emotion that feels like it's not safe to feel, or it would be too much for the people around us if we felt it or named it or expressed it in some way. Anytime our family or our culture tells us that some part of ourselves, some emotion or expression of our identity is unacceptable, that part or that emotion can go underground and be exiled out of our awareness and come out later as depression. Another example that's really common with this is inhibited grieving. So if you go through a loss and yet the feeling of sadness of that loss doesn't feel acceptable at the time, or if you get the message that it would be weak or would be overwhelming for the people around you, or for some reason it just doesn't feel safe to grieve, then that grieving can be put on hold and stay inside you in some way that comes out later as depression. This can also happen with swallowed rage or even spontaneity and joy. If it's not safe to really be yourself and express the whole of you and your full range of emotions, or your full sexual identity, or some creative part of you is not allowed to be named and felt, this can all result in what I call logjam depression. Why logjam? Because when loggers are cutting trees for wood and the logs are flowing down the river toward the mill, everything goes smoothly. But when the logs all get jammed together and they can't flow, that's when problems start. And the same can be true for emotions. So the idea is not that an emotion itself causes depression, right? It's not that you're so sad and then you become depressed because you're so sad, or you're so angry and you become depressed because you're so angry. It's not just the feelings and having feelings themselves that cause depression, but when those feelings are not allowed to flow, when they're not allowed to be named and metabolized, when they're not allowed to be accepted within you. Again, they don't have to be acted on, but they need to run their course. So the kinds of therapy that really solve, that really heal logjam depression, right? Because medication itself doesn't just allow your emotions to flow and to be understood. So you need to be able to notice and name what it is that's been cut off and bring it back into awareness and into your experience, into your felt experience, not just intellectual understanding, but if you can bring it back into your awareness and into your body and allow it to flow through your body, or some part of you that's been cut off, if you can allow it to come back into your life and into your self-expression, then that underlying logjam depression can be freed up, can be healed.